easier, much easier if you guys want to unmute and jump in and stuff as well. I guess, Cedric, what do you think? Should we start it up now, or how are we doing?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, cool. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us in the first premium class of 3, I think. So this one is obstacles in practice and teaching. And like I said, these premium rooms, since it's smaller groups, we obviously are going to talk about stuff, and we have kind of bullet points we're going to run through, subtopics, but we want to encourage you guys to make these premium areas as useful to you personally as possible. So that means if you're a practitioner and you really want to know something specific, and we're just kind of talking about things that aren't relating to your experience, steer us in a direction that will be more helpful for you. If you're a teacher, the same applies. If there's things that we're talking about and you'd like to know something in relation to how you're teaching, then jump right in. And again, you can do that in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself at will. We empower you to unmute whenever you like. And Junius, hello. Junius is here. He's a student graduate from DC. So cool to see you here.
Hey.
Hello. So we were just saying it's very casual in the premium groups. You can jump in with questions at any point. With the obstacles in practice and teaching, or maybe should we do very quick introductions? I'm TJ, in case you haven't been in any of the other sessions. Cedric, who are you?
This time you started the quick introduction, so I don't start analyzing the topic. Yeah. Hi, my name is Athena. In the last group we had, the last panel, TJ said, would you like to start the introduction? And I started talking about introducing the topic somehow. That's what I understood for 10 minutes. And then I was like, and who are you again? So yeah, awesome, my name is Athena, and I am in Corfu right now at the base of INEA Yoga. And I'm one of the teachers of this beautiful event, and very happy to be with you all.
Yeah, Cedric, I think I introduced myself today already 3 times, so let's keep it to Cedric. It's enough.
So with obstacles in practice and teaching, we wanted to make a topic that we thought would be kind of helpful in terms of like, what kind of stuff do we come across and face that kind of prevent us from accomplishing what we want to accomplish as practitioners and as teachers, and what maybe are some ideas or ways that we individually deal with those obstacles and kind of overcome them. So we're kind of going to go through these like in terms of like dimensional obstacles. So the first kind of dimension, like the most obvious, is like physical obstacles. What might be some physical obstacles to practicing and to teaching? So I can start, but like Cedric, Athena, jump in whenever you like, and anyone else that wants to share stuff too. So for physical obstacles, like for me, and I'll probably just be talking my personal experience through this, I find not having, because I travel a lot or move around a lot, trying to find that consistency in a physical space, I find that can be a big obstacle. Like if you don't have a space for whatever reason that is very consistent, that can be really difficult. And I find what helps me is trying to take out of the space the things I need to practice and stay motivated to practice. So like, I don't always like to plug technology, but apps like Insight Timer or things where I know, like when I hit that button, wherever I am, I start doing what that timer was set up for. And I can kind of circumvent any lethargic feeling that day by just like hitting the button, like wherever I am, just not thinking about it. And then once it starts, I feel compelled, like, oh, I got to practice now, the timer's going. And then, once you get into it, it's much easier. But physical could also be just like our physical bodies. And so that is something that from a teaching perspective, making sure that I'm anticipating as best I can what students might be struggling with. And so I tend to try in my head to have kind of broad strokes, like kind of catch-all things that I can mention. So instead of trying to know what every student in the class is dealing with, I'll just talk about joints. Everybody pay attention to your joints in this next pose, whatever that may be. Because I'll sometimes forget if a student says, oh, I have a back or a knee issue. By the time the class gets rolling and we're into poses, I don't remember who had what. So I'll just kind of mention, like, as we get into this pose, now's the time to check your joints and make sure there's no injuries you're navigating. So in that regard, it's kind of putting it back on the students, but having just some general ideas I can give them to make sure that they're paying attention. Those are a couple ideas to start with. Athena, Cedric, how about you guys? Physical obstacles.
I have a problem in general as a practitioner with my belly. Sometimes it gets really bloated, and that really keeps me back from practicing in a way that feels relaxing, or in a way that feels like I can actually get something out of my practice, rather than get frustrated for having eaten the wrong thing that I know bothers me.
How do you overcome that?
So it's very difficult to, it seems like it's a whole iceberg that I cannot overcome most of the times. And the only solution that I have found so far, if you guys have better tips, I'm open. The only solution that I have found so far is to just adjust the practice, to change the practice. So if, for example, I have decided that I want to do, I don't know, twists for a couple of weeks, and then suddenly my belly is not feeling right, I will do a meditation instead and leave the twists out and just be in a comfortable seat, or take a soft forward fold with a big cushion or something like that. So for me, the way to not suffer more from something that becomes an obstacle is to actually re-establish or define what practice means for me on that day.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so for me, it's very important to keep a practice in a routine, in a, let's say, daily routine, or maybe it's just a few days a week, but to keep it. And the obstacle is to not lose that. But in a physical way, it often can happen that you're either sick, or you have done a practice which doesn't suit specific needs of the body at the moment. And it's a bit similar what Athena said, like, to keep the practice and modify it to whatever is good at this day for your body is more important than to just do the practice, whatever it is, or to drop the practice. So better change it, do a little, do something else than to drop it. So that would be my favorite number one tip, because keeping this regular practice gives you so much of growth, if this is what you're looking for. It's not everybody's aim probably in practice, but if you want to walk the path of spirituality, you somehow need to keep practicing. Practice can be adapted also, let's say, off the mat in like into real life, and then even without really practicing, like taking time for practice and take it off the mat and doing it in life would also half count for me. But we have to be very careful with that, because that's an easy solution for the mind to trick you, to say, I did well today. I did my practice already in life. I don't need to go and do the practice on the mat. Whatever the practice is, maybe it's just sitting on your meditation pillow for 5 minutes. But so that is used to be careful.
That reminds me of lately I've been studying like graphic design and putting a portfolio together, and there's a thing called MVP, minimal viable portfolio. And I think it applies in different fields, but it applies kind of cool to this, and the acronym still works. Minimum viable practice. So it's kind of like if there's a day where you just kind of can't do something that you're used to doing that might be quite a bit in depth or extravagant in different ways, just do the minimal viable practice, the thing that still keeps it as like your practice, and continues that progression day to day, but also acknowledges, like Athena was saying, some days you just have to embrace it's not the day for something. How about you guys? Any thoughts or questions? Yep.
I think often about what you said in our last session about your potato chip method. I think about this all the time, where you're like, you just do one pose. If you just get on your mat and do one thing, you're not going to be able, I mean, depending on the day, some days that's it and that's fine. But for the most part, you're going to keep going. And I think about that all the time. It really stuck. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about right now. You know, if you just do the minimum possible just to keep that trajectory, I think it definitely helps. And one thing I wanted to add to what you said, TJ, about like not always having the space and having like insight timer or something like that be your motivator. For me, and I think for a lot of us, music can do that. I know I have an album from one of my teachers who's a bhakti yogi who composes all this beautiful music that's rhythmic with the intention of helping you establish a rhythmic breath. And this album I've been listening to on repeat. And when I traveled recently and I was having a hard time getting the motivation because I wasn't in my space to do the practice, I put that album on in my headphones and immediately I kind of drop into that like practice mode. And then I was able to just like find space wherever I was because I was already in that space because the music took me there, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I
yeah,
like that.
music is so powerful.
Yeah. And I'll share the link to his album because it's incredible.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, this particular album it goes through the Yoga Sutras, and it's all mantra to each sutra. Like, it's incredible. I'll find that and share that for you.
Nice.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Anyone else thoughts or obstacles that you guys deal with for physical obstacles?
Plenty. That I figured out that hotel rooms are a big obstacle. I think because you never have enough space, and the carpets are just horrible. You know, you put your yoga mat on the carpet, and I just feel like I don't want to move. I don't want to move off the mat. So there are certain poses I can't do, but I figured out there are a few yin poses you can always do. You can always do a couple of Kapalabhati things, a bit of Kundalini yoga. But what works for me is when I don't have time at all, sitting down with like a meditation timer, 15 minutes, 1 minute chimes, and just breathe and just, you know, try and get it down to 2 breaths a minute. Start with 4 and try and get it down to 2 breaths, because 1 is really a big challenge. But that is something I learned from the whole breath walking stuff. So that is something that I think that actually always works, even in a car. So on long car journeys, when I'm not the driver, of course, but then just sit down, do some kind of mudras. Just mudras and breathing together, that does it for me. So that's when I can't do anything, at least I can sort of suppress bad energy by doing something like that. That's how I feel about it.
That's awesome. I like the segmented timer too, like, so it doesn't feel like, oh, 15 minutes sometimes can feel like so much, and like
Yes.
other days
Yeah.
not so much, but those like 1 minute intervals probably makes it more palatable.
Yes, and it's quite interesting. I did that just with a few minutes once with a yoga group. Before a few exercises, they had to count their breaths to figure out how many times do I breathe in a minute. And then we did a bit of some asanas, and then later on I let them count again, and they had less breath, even though they were working out. And they actually, it was active asanas. It was not yin, it was really active, but still their breath had slowed down. And that was something that was very impressive to them, because they could figure out a minute is a minute, and they were watching them. So the second time I gave them 2 minutes, and it felt the same to them somehow, like the first minute. And I like these meditation apps where you can really I've got one of these here. I think this is one of the best things I ever got. This
I have that, the Enso timer.
Yeah, because you can put in different times. You know, you can put in 15 seconds and then a minute and then 25 seconds and then 2 minutes. So, but you need to be aware of how many different times you need. I just love this thing. I hope it'll last a long time.
Yeah, and it's not like it's not a phone where it's got millions of other apps. Like you can just be like, this thing is only for meditation and nothing else.
Exactly. But well, you can always just, you know, put your phone on flight mode and turn Wi-Fi off if you have an app on it. That also works, but we rarely do that. That's the problem.
Exactly. Flight mode or Instagram.
Yeah, but I like having something for something only, even though I wanted to declutter, but I'm happy about this.
Nice. Yeah. Anyone else for physical obstacles?
My main physical obstacle is myself, really. Yeah, I'm still not. I still haven't managed to lose weight since last year when we were talking. So yeah, that's my main physical obstacle, and my balance is terrible. Doing the vinyasa with Athena earlier, the one-legged ones, I was falling over every 5 seconds. Like, but I was keeping a smile on my face and I was laughing at myself rather than getting angry with myself. So that's a step in the right direction. So.
Yeah, I'd say that's the perfect step. Like overcoming like our expectations for our body and things that we want to be able to do that we just can't, like making it fun like a kid, you know, kids wobbling all over the place. And if you can tap into that overcomes that, because it's like, oh, I'm such a silly human trying to do these things, but at least I'm enjoying being in this body, like goofing around.
Yeah, it's something I learned a few years ago. I used to see a personal trainer at a gym, and I was really self-conscious about some of the exercises that he was teaching me. And then one day I just said to myself, you know, just have fun with it. And from then on, it was like, I wasn't so self-conscious. I was just like, he's telling me to do this for a reason, so, you know, do it.
Yeah, that's a good, having fun. Like, does everyone, like, I'm curious on that note, does everyone feel like their practice is fun or playful? Like, is that part, or does it feel like something else? Like I find the times that I overcome my obstacles the best is when it's fun and playful. Like that gets me over whatever is stopping me. What's it like for everyone else? How does like play and fun work into it for you?
This is Junius.
Hey, Junius.
Just go back to your first question. Getting on the mat is just a huge accomplishment for me. Personally, since I work full-time from home. Plus, you know, also in this, I do other modes of exercises. But when I do get on the mat, if I'm on for at least 20 minutes, that's perfect. I've learned over time, I don't need to do like an hour practice every day. You know, and I realize over time I get bored. Like if I keep doing this for a long period of time, something else will caught my attention. I also learned from I'm learning not to be so rigid in my practice and have some fun with it, and do other different styles or different methods of practice. One thing I've been kind of experimenting is doing Tai Chi and yoga together. So fusing different styles together and having a little fun with it. So I've learned if I don't take myself so seriously, I can have a nice practice and have fun with it.
Nice.
Yeah. Speaking.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Speaking of time, even in the old traditions from yoga, they have a little bit of different time counting, and one time unit, what they recommend to do a practice per day is 24 minutes. So that's like the minimum, or like even recommended time, which is not so long. Most classes are longer. So if you find those 24 minutes, that's like considered even in the traditions as enough. And they say not only doing it, if you want to do it longer, then cut it in half, or not in half, but cut it at 24 minutes and then do the other 24 minutes maybe at the evening or something. So it doesn't need to be long or something. That's maybe a misconcept we sometimes have. The more is the better. So you can start with just 25 minutes or whatever a day, and that's pretty cool, pretty good already.
Yeah. And I find you can minimize that even, I mean, I'm not recommending this often, but there are times where like I'm on a plane between time zones and I'm like losing half a day and I'm like, I didn't do my meditation today. And I'll just do a minute, like just 1 minute, just to keep that thread going, you know, even if it's a spider web thread. So like sometimes like you can kind of for yourself, because you're the only person that's dealing with this.
I did that for a long time. I said to myself, 1 breath a day is my practice. And that's something I could do. I could do every day. So I was satisfied. I was happy. Like 1 breath, 1 conscious breath a day. And I did it like I put myself into a situation which I do every day, that was going down the stairs, and said at the beginning, before I go down, I do the breath, and then that's it. And I was happy. Cool, I achieved. And it evolved from there. So 1 breath a day.
Positive feedback.
Maintaining that foundation. And I think Junie has touched on too, like something like having like a repertoire of things, so that if you get bored with like one routine that's just like, okay, it's stagnant now, it may come back around, but let me do some Tai Chi for a little while, or let me do this other practice, something that you want to do that day, even if the consistency of some other practice just doesn't quite hold up, you're keeping something going. And I find I do that a lot with like different Qigong forms lately. It's like, which form do I want to do today? And it's like, okay, I'll do this one because that's how I feel today. And sometimes that will replace my meditation practice even, which I try to maintain that at the minimum. But having like different things that interest you for your practice can be really helpful.
Another word I want to,
Go ahead.
you go first.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think a lot of this, what Derek spoke about, what Athena spoke about, what you're talking about, TJ, with play, and Junius with different forms, I think it all speaks to this ability of the yin yoga practice to cultivate and develop this ability to give ourselves grace, you know, to just give your body grace on any given day. If your belly is big, the twist can go the other way, you know, just like if we were dealing with a pregnant student, or if you're just tired, giving yourself the grace to have a slower practice, or maybe you start with the intention of a meditation practice and you just cannot sit still and it evolves into something else. I think that's why I love yin yoga so much, is it just has taught me, and I see, and I try to infuse this so much when I teach, it's just taught me the ability to give myself so much grace, you know, for where I'm at and what I need, and to adapt and to be playful and to not take myself so seriously, and to just honor, you know, the human experience
Yeah,
that we're all having.
And yin yoga teaches that to become soft, and also an obstacle is showing you something that is not soft at the moment. Maybe you can soften around that. So an obstacle is something you identify as you doing wrong. And maybe if you take that away, the obstacle maybe dissolves by itself somehow. If you just get a bit more of the softness into your mindset, actually, to say, this is an obstacle. Yes, I struggle with that, but hey, my body is how it is. So I just soften into it. And it's always the first step.
Totally. I had a job, just quick. I had a job that I hated for a long time. I hated it. And I finally one day thought, maybe if I quit hating this job, I'll quit hating this job. And it worked. It was just like this active pressure against, you know, when you come against the edge of sensation in a yin pose, you know, you have the choice to push against it like you're pushing against a wall, or to lean back into it like you're leaning into a hammock. And I think that, and I use that a lot when I teach, because I think it's a good analogy. It's a good sort of, you know, you talk, TJ, in that Qigong, you talked about fine tuning your awareness of what it feels like to be inside of your body. And I think that's a good, indicator for people. But when we come up against these edges in ourselves, maybe they're not physical, but maybe it's a way that we talk to ourselves or belief that we have. Are we like really rigid with that? Or can we, like Cedric said, can we soften around it and maybe soften and step back and examine that maybe that's not true, what we've been telling ourselves, or it doesn't have to be, or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really nice one to think about. And it kind of touches on the affirmations, like that, how we speak to ourselves, and the fact that we can craft, like maybe sometimes we have kind of a subconscious narrative that we don't always have control over, but we do have control over deliberate narratives. And I think sometimes I forget this, and the times I remind myself of it, it's so empowering to say, what am I struggling with? What is not working the way I want it to work? And what can I say to myself to make myself okay with that? So like the way you were like, if I stop hating the thing I hate, I'll stop hating the thing I hate. It's kind of this beautiful little mental spiral. And I've done it before where I'll be thinking too much about what other people think of me. And that will kind of be inhibiting things I want to do. And so I'll say, okay, what's an affirmation that will counteract that? And it's almost like a mantra, like you have beats, but you just say, and what I had for a while was, I don't have to explain myself and not everyone has to like me. And I would say that over and over, and not to kind of not care about other people, but to not make what I think other people think of me affect me doing the things I want to do. And I just said that every day until all of the stuff that it was counteracting dropped away. And I find that so powerful and so accessible to us.
Also, obstacles can reveal at a second level somehow how you see yourself, because where is the obstacle coming from? Is it how others may see you? Is it like something you want to be seen as, like the person who does every day, or who practices a 1 hour, or who has a good body or something? So it not necessarily serves your inner needs. It serves some outer needs or expectations, let's say. So an obstacle can reveal one of those unconscious bias. Is that the word? Yeah. So probably it's worth exploring obstacles.
And I think too, that's kind of one of the other obstacles in our subheadings was mental obstacles. And I think like, yeah, we're kind of getting into that realm now. Like we learn something about if it's a physical obstacle, obviously our body has limitations we have to respect. If it's a mental obstacle, like that's a little bit more like the obstacle can, like Cedric was saying, reveal something about yourself, like, and then try to work with that in a different way than we do physically. Anyone else thoughts on like mental obstacles?
Couldn't also they somehow be related? Because often when we are stressed or things are going on, we imagine we don't have time when maybe we do have time, but just because of the pressure, we don't allow this time to be given to us as a time for practice, but instead is good enough to be time for scrolling on Instagram or shopping online or chatting to a friend for way too long and analyzing something that happened 3 years ago. I don't know. That's the patterns I could find in myself, but I'm sure we all have similar tricks to not find time for practice. So in a way, time for practice is something that can be very valid, but often it comes across this way when the problem is not actually the time, it's just our mind inhibiting the finding of the time.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I find that when I get stressed, I comfort eat, and then that leads me to thinking, well, I can't practice now because I'll feel uncomfortable on the mat, so I'll just have another bag of crisps and another chocolate bar and watch a movie.
Fantastic.
But don't you think sometimes obstacles can also protect us and are something that we need to keep something we don't want to delve into or dig into in a safe space? I discovered that with people working with voices, for example, that some topics are not ready to be touched yet. So there is an obstacle. It might be mental, it might be physical, whatever, but it's sort of also, it can be something very protective. So I think just thinking an obstacle is something to get rid of is not necessarily so. Why don't we try and embrace it and just feel like, what are you actually? What are you? What are you doing? Why do I need you? What do I actually need? And then just, you know, maybe you don't have to remove it, but maybe you want to eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree totally. It's a little bit like a yin pose. You go into some place of discomfort, but you don't want to go into pain. That's too much. Your body cannot cope. As well, works your mind. Like, lean into that discomfort, maybe see why is there an obstacle, how does it work, or what does it work in you, but don't go into the pain, like
And
when it's not ready.
Yeah. But on the other hand, some people are incapable of distinguishing pain from discomfort.
That's the practice.
Right.
Exactly. It's the first time they feel their body at all in a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's about getting curious, right? I mean, I think that's what if we're teaching, that's what we're trying to teach, is teach people how to get curious and to, you know, assess where is that threshold? What does that feel like for me? And how do I then know if it's safe to be here, to take a step further, or if I need to take a step back? Because I like what you're saying, Jenna, definitely, especially if you're dealing with people or yourself in a crisis moment of any sort, whether it's physical injury or a mental crisis moment, you know, being really gentle with that and just getting really curious.
Yeah, when TJ earlier asked if we find playfulness in our practice, I couldn't quite relate with the word playfulness, but I can definitely relate with the word curiosity.
It feels a little too like the overlap there between physical and mental. Like what we learn from the physical practice of yin yoga is our boundaries, and in like respecting the boundaries, recognizing that they may change or we may not be ready for them to change. And that goes back to what Jana was saying, like we have these mental boundaries that we may be interpreting as an obstacle that needs to be overcome, but maybe it is just a boundary that is not ready to change or is there protecting something. And maybe just seeing it and being aware of it is all we need to do.
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
Distinguishing also on physical and mental and emotional, especially on the emotional level, distinguishing what your body is telling you, because sometimes fear is healthy and sometimes fear is an avoidance strategy. So it's learning the language of the body and of the emotions, and that's practice.
Any other thoughts anyone has on like physical, mental, or emotional obstacles or boundaries? I think that's a really, I think it is important now that John has pointed it out to kind of give it this dual perspective. These obstacles could also simply be boundaries.
They could also be something that you think is a boundary, but it actually isn't if you push it. Like when I first started practicing yin, I think it was like my 3rd or 4th class, and the teacher was describing frog pose. And I was like, I'm never going to be able to get my knees that wide apart. But what the hell, I'll try anyway. And it became one of my favorite poses. So I thought there was a boundary and I pushed and there wasn't. So
it was like a mental boundary and your body was like, that's not a boundary for us, do it.
It's not a boundary, get those knees wide.
Anyone else before we jump to the next subtopic? So the next one, and I'm really curious to explore this one, energetic obstacles or boundaries, because this certainly is going to overlap and interrelate with some of the things we've already kind of pulled out from this topic. But where and how do you find obstacles that are energetic related? How do you even understand that? Maybe it might be different for all of us. And is there some way that you work with that or overcome it if it's something that is requires overcoming in some way? Any thoughts on energetic?
For me, you still there, TJ? Okay, you were
Yeah.
the screen froze a couple times.
Yeah, there might be some lag. Sorry.
For me personally, for energy, one thing I've learned, there's just a point where I feel like I needed to do something. I had to do something. I had to have it right now. It turned out to be disastrous for me. I've learned over time it will happen when it happens. If I need it, it will show up when I need it. So I've learned over time not to force myself to do something that I may not be ready for at that time. And I've gotten a different result. That goes on for my yoga practice. I may have taken a training or something. I may not need it right now. I maybe like 6 months down the road to where I may need it. And I've learned to not to force things. But when it happens naturally, I'm there. I'm committed to it. And also, once I've done that, it made a huge difference in my practice. And me as a person overall, I feel like I feel like I don't need to follow the crowd or do what everyone else is doing, but work at my own pace and work at my own time. And I've noticed a huge shift in my energy.
Is there some way that you distinguish between like when something is something you need to just wait for the proper moment and something that is instead something that you just have to kind of do on any particular day? Like, is there some distinguishing factor for you?
I just do it in my body. If I'm not enjoying it, if I'm not having a good time, if I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? I just know it's like, you know what? It's not the right time. Or if it's not connecting with me, or I feel like if it's a chore, I know sometimes tell me to maybe step aside. Like for Tai Chi, I took a Tai Chi training last year. I did like actually I did like an online training for Tai Chi. I started practicing at the beginning of January. I love it. I realized I didn't need it at that time, but if the time for me to start really, incorporating Tai Chi into my practice was in January, and my body let me know that, and the universe let me know that it was time. But try to do it after that training, it wasn't working for me.
It's kind of like trusting in intuition, I think, because I relate to that a lot too. Like the Qigong practices, I had some earlier in the year I was trying to force, like, I've signed up for this thing, I have to do it and finish it now. And my body was just like, you don't want to do this now. Like, and then like a year later, I came back to it and I was like, now it feels like it's happening. So that's kind of like an intuitive approach to things, which is always really interesting. Anyone else thoughts on intuition? I guess is an interesting way to talk about obstacles, but also energetic thoughts. Is energetic a tricky kind of way of thinking about like what does that mean? Or
I don't quite know where to put it. So I was just wondering, because there's also physical energy, of course. Like I caught Lyme's disease last year, and I'm still struggling with that, and it does affect my physical energy, and that really is a big thing. So I'm doing a sun salutation and I feel I'm blacking out with all this up and down. I didn't have that before ever, and it's just like everything goes black for a moment. I feel like I can't do this anymore. But I think that's not what you're talking about.
No, that's for me personally, that's where I was coming from. When I think of energetics, it usually starts like, am I just too tired today to do this? Or like you were saying, I've had times where I'll be like working out like at the gym or calisthenics and I feel dizzy. And so sometimes what I need to think about is like, is today just not the day and my energy levels aren't what they need to be? Or sometimes I'll start looking at my nutrition. So it has an interesting interplay, just the physical feeling of, do I have the energy to do this? Which is energetics, like also from a different lens.
But it links closely to the obstacles again, like topic wise, physical obstacle, energy. That's why I wasn't sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. I wonder too, like, do we overcome or work with the way we feel energetically, like if we're too tired, or like, I mean, I've had too much coffee on particular days and I'm just jittery and I'm like, I need a certain practice today that is not what I think I need. Like, I'm not gonna go run 10 miles just because like I need to like simmer down and get grounded. And so it changes like that kind of energy, or a sleepy energy. Like if I have a meditation practice on a particular day and I'm just like, I'm too tired to meditate, I'll meditate anyway, because like, it's like the tiredness is interesting to observe in my meditation. So I've learned to kind of appreciate that as a feeling, even though I don't want to do it because I'm tired. So there's some interesting kind of interplay between like how we feel energetically and what it makes us want to do, not want to do, what should we do anyway, and what should we, like we've been talking about, say this is not the moment for this. Any other thoughts anyone has?
In terms of yin yoga, I don't actually experience that. If feeling too low would never stop me from practicing yin, and feeling too energetic would be a very good reason to practice yin. So in terms of yin yoga, I wouldn't easily, I'm not right now able to find a way how I could relate it energetically, but definitely doing a yang practice, I can feel tired, or I can feel not motivated, or more not somehow activated enough to do it.
Yeah, I'm with Athena. I kind of like, as it relates to yin, I don't feel like energetics are an obstacle for me. Though I do think it's interesting, this idea of doing yin before, because I took your class earlier, Athena, and this idea of doing yin before yang style practice, it's been presented to me time and time again, and I was always just like, that just doesn't feel right, doesn't vibe, I don't get it. And I recently went on a glorious 8-day vacation where I had no agenda, which was the most amazing thing. And I found myself starting my practices, trying to start my practices with sun salutations, and just not like, it just wasn't feeling right. And so then I gave myself the space to do yin first. And I found myself towards the end, like things were ramping up. And I was like, well, damn it, they've been talking about this for a reason. It's making sense. And it didn't, but it was never like, it was surprising to me, I guess, is how I'm pulling this back to energy. It was surprising to me that even though I was doing these practices right when I got up, so I've had a full night of rest, I'm on vacation, I don't have any priorities, I was still finding more energetic benefit out of starting slow and then letting that evolve into a sort of a brighter expression of my energy for the day ahead, and how effective that was. And so I was really intrigued to take the 45-minute version. And I know you said this is so short, but I'm just like, in my head, I'm thinking, how the hell can you do this in 45 minutes? Because I spent 2 hours on the beach because I had the time, you know? But like, as a teacher, I'm like, how would I fit that into a 45? That's where my brain goes. Like, how could I make that work? But every time that I'm sort of challenged in that way, and then I take a class, I'm like, that it's just so simple. Like, it's just so simple. You just don't have to overthink it as much as you do. Let it be. But anyway, circling back, I'll talk all day if you let me.
In a way, similar to what Cedric was saying about the one breath, you get the positive feedback of, I've already started, I've half done my practice. Oh, maybe I can do a little more. Oh yeah, maybe I can do one. Yeah, I'll do one sun salutation and see how I feel afterwards. Okay, maybe if I bring a leg to the front, then maybe somehow I can start from there and do some postures where their legs are not next to each other, they have a big step, and somehow it just happens. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Another way for me to stay motivated is to actually have a practice that repeats. Because if I have the expectation to myself to be creative, to have a new practice every day, to change or something, I cannot relax so much into it, and I have to think a lot and so on. So a motivation for me, and that's changed in my life. It was the opposite before that. is now to do the same thing, just because I know what's coming and I like what's coming and I can go deep and enjoy it. And I think motivation is an energy. You need some motivation to do something. If you don't have that, then it's an energetic obstacle, in my opinion. And for me, that helped a lot to have just a structured practice. And I guess that's different for everybody and it changes in life, but it could be a tip or an idea to try that.
It's really interesting, like, because I've recently been thinking about that and how it relates. You have like the depth practice, which is like the every day it's the same, like you're saying, and you refine and refine and refine your awareness of that practice, because each day it can get deeper because it becomes so familiar. And then there's like the breadth, like depth and breadth is kind of like a three-dimensional, like different planes. Like the breadth kind of practice is like the a la carte, like picking things for that day, and you become aware of like the scope of possible practices, but maybe you don't really refine and go deep on any particular one. And it's really neat to kind of, for me, it's been super helpful to think in those terms lately, like which things am I going deep on and like refining, and which things am I just kind of skimming to get like a sense of like the surface of everything. So yeah, it's a really neat way to think about what do you need on that day, like depth or breadth.
I think that breadth exploration is really helpful for teachers as well, because if you can give yourself the freedom to tweak poses and to get into, like, I've been playing with half saddle a lot lately, and like what the back foot is doing, like if it's tucked or if I'm letting it, like my ankle be at more of a 90-degree angle, if I'm leaning to the left or leaning to the right. And I think that's really helpful, because you might tune into a sensation in your body that your students might be having that you hadn't explored before or experienced before. And then you can offer more variety and modifications for people. And I like that thinking of the breadth, not necessarily versus, but that 360, like you said, that spherical sort of dynamic of like having the container of a set practice that you can go really deep in, which, Cedric, I'm with you. I'm kind of leaning towards that as I get further into my teaching and as I get older and want to turn my brain off a little bit more. But it also tweaking and exploring like just even a shift of the ribs and what that does, in the physical body and what it might offer. I think that's kind of that breadth that you were talking about, TJ, at least for me.
Yeah, it's like it depends on how you contextualize it. Like it's a subtle breadth within like a deepening practice.
Yeah.
Or there's like bouncing from practices to practices, which like I kind of do with qigong, or like Junius was talking about with like yoga or tai chi, or like different almost like funnels, and we can go down one funnel and try out different things within that space and get a certain breadth as we go deep. Or we can kind of just completely bounce from funnel to funnel just to kind of keep our practices going and our interest and motivation. So we've got a few more minutes. We could jump into the big one, which we haven't gotten to yet, and maybe we have already, but like spiritual obstacles. Like in 8 minutes, what's everyone's spiritual obstacles? No, I think this is one that is going to be dramatically different for each individual. And I always find it's fun to think about, though, because sometimes we take for granted what our spirituality is in our life and in our experience of this life. And so trying to think like, again, not necessarily obstacles may not be the right word. Maybe it's boundaries or just things that we're working with in our spiritual journey. But like, are there things that stop you from going into a certain spiritual direction or depth? And just to give an example for myself, like I've found during the pandemic, when there's so much uncertainty, maybe the time when I need spirituality the most, but always being so concerned with like my income and things like that has prevented me from feeling really spiritually connected to what I have been in the past. So it's been interesting to see that, like, oh, having to be very concerned about like just worldly kind of bread and butter aspects of life, it's become more difficult to really grasp what my spiritual practices need to be or should be, or even if I can give them the priority that I have in the past. So it's an obstacle, but at the same time, maybe it's just something that you accept and roll with for the time being. Do you guys have any kind of similar things or related things to talk about?
I think for me, what's got me through this pandemic is having my spiritual practice and having a space where I could go to, at least at my church, having a space to go to on Sundays to get that spiritual foundation. And this year I took my vows for Buddhism back in 2017. Now I'm in a space to go deeper in my Buddhism practice this year. And when it comes to something like that, to me, things for me have to be slow and gradual. It has to be when it's right. And this year is right for me to really go deep into my Buddhism practice, to establish that foundation for me, to help me, because it's interesting out in the world. I need something that's going to help me to ground me, where I won't lose my mind, and because of what's going on in the world and what's going on in the United States. So I needed that. For me, that spiritual process I need that spiritual practice that's going to help me, that's going to ground me.
It's nice to hear someone talk about spiritual practice as grounding, because I think sometimes I forget, and spiritual, I think of all kind of out there ephemeral things, but yeah, it's a tangible grounding thing for us. Yeah, it was nice to hear.
Absolutely, I agree fully. The grounding is like, for me, the base. And I think even too much energy can be a spiritual obstacle, because you're just pumping up your whole system. Your body is kind of like nervous from the inside, and you don't get a clear thought or anything because you're just all over the place. So grounding is so important. And it was for me, or actually at the moment is, I do a practice that is quite evoking energy, and that's so challenging. So this is really taking me away from profound steadiness, because I'm just too much pumped up. So I stopped and went back to grounding practice. So absolutely.
Nice.
I think for me, busyness has been a spiritual obstacle. And I think it, especially over the last couple of years, has been a lot to do with what you said, TJ, about the bread and butter of life, about like literally just making sure that rent is paid and that I'm not completely draining, savings, that I can continue to at least stabilize that, if not build it. And then as a teacher who has another full-time job to support, I tried to transition for a while into teaching being more of a sustaining thing. And it really just killed my spirit. And I this vacation that I had the real luxury and privilege to take definitely highlighted for me that when I have the space, when I take more off of my plate, that's when I come back to remembering why I'm doing this, what my spiritual foundation is, like Junia said, and I'm just a better, more centered person and teacher, certainly teacher and friend and partner and all those things. So busyness has really been a spiritual obstacle that I've tried to overcome by setting boundaries and saying no more, and just taking the pressure off myself to make a career out of a passion, and maybe it'll work someday, like Junia said, like maybe right now is just not the time, and eventually I'll be able to sustain myself as a yoga teacher and a teacher of spiritual practices. But for now, doing less has helped me to connect spiritually, which is what it's all about for me.
I agree with everything you all have said so far. And I would like to add that for me, sometimes a spiritual obstacle can be the wish for spirituality itself. And in a very calming or grounding session, if the wish to feel more spiritual or achieve spiritually different steps then becomes an obstacle itself.
Yeah. And I like how you almost have to figure out what you're calling the word spiritual, like what that's relating to, in order to kind of figure out if you're going towards what you want to go towards, or if your attempt to define it a certain way is preventing you from achieving what, or unifying with what you want to.
I also can relate quite strongly to being too busy to actually live your spiritual life, and I try to remind me over and over again, why do I do this? To not lose the aim, the original aim somehow. And it's a constant reminding myself I am doing this work, which is not anything related with spiritual, to enable to have time for some other deeper work, let's say, or deeper experiences or spiritual work. And sometimes I lose track and I'm just completely caught in the business world, and then I have to pull back. And for me, this is like a wave, a constant pulling back. It drags me, and I come back and say, no, you have to stop for a moment. Take your time, once 1 hour a day, or 1 hour a day, or something, like to remind constantly back.
Nice. So looks like we're pretty close to the time for the session. Any other last thoughts or anything, Cedric, Athena? Anything we want to toss in before we head out?
No, so far not. I'm grateful that we have people, and it's a very fruitful exchange. It felt last time very similar, but again, it's nice. It feels like having online friends around and not having like a lecture where we just talk. It's more like we are speaking about things with friends and elaborating, and
I remember
nice.
Katie's plants in the background from last session, and remember Derek's colorful hair. It was blue last time. It's wonderfully exciting this time too. It's fun to have somehow familiar faces now.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining. You guys make these premium offerings what they are. So we hope to see you guys in some of the next ones or in other sessions the next couple of days. So reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, we're probably all good to say good night.
Namaste. Good night.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.